In this part of the lecture, I'll give a brief overview of the different ways that internet censorship can be circumvented from a technical perspective. Later on in the course, we'll have an entire module devoted to circumvention techniques, and so this is really just meant to provide a very quick, high-level overview of the different types of ways that internet censorship can be circumvented. So how can censorship be circumvented? One means for circumventing internet censorship is technical. So one could use technologies such as a virtual private network, or an anonymous communication tool, or a secure messaging application to circumvent censorship. And usually the technique here is designed to hide communications from some kind of observer. So if you have a censor, as we discussed, who's sitting in between two parties who wish to communicate, typically what the technical circumvention software does is create some kind of secure or obfuscated communication channel or tunnel between those two endpoints so that someone watching in between is unable to tell what content is being exchanged, and typically also what the endpoints of the communication are. Because it's not just the content that you may want to avoid exposing, but also the very fact that you're communicating with a particular website or even using a particular service. Now clearly there's a bootstrapping issue here because the censor could simply block the VPN software or Tor or the messaging application and so forth. And so there's a need to develop technology to make it possible to use these pieces of software in a way that evades censorship as well. And those types of nuances are the types of things we'll talk about in a later module in the course. Another way to circumvent internet censorship is to simply build the internet yourself. And there are various ways that people have tried to do this. Often a common technology that is brought to bear, wireless mesh networks. And this can also be done in the context of cellular networks as well. Of course, a wireless mesh network by itself doesn't completely solve the problem because a network that's built in isolation is disconnected from the rest of the internet and all the content and services that one may wish to communicate or otherwise reach. And so there's, again, a bootstrapping problem that has to be solved even in the context of a bring your own internet type technical solution. Another technical means for circumvention is language-based circumvention. So these language techniques often seek to circumvent a technology by substituting characters or words to confuse a censorship technology that's relying on keyword-based circumvention to block the tool. And we'll explore how NLP, or natural language processing, is increasingly being both used and evaded for techniques ranging from outright blocking and filtering to online content moderation on various platforms. Another way that circumvention can be implemented technically is in the internet infrastructure itself, or the internet routing infrastructure. This is commonly called decoy routing, and we'll look at a couple of different systems that implement this in a later module in the course. But the typical way that these systems work is to instrument a router somewhere in the middle of the internet called a decoy router that effectively deflects the traffic from the observed destination, the one that the adversary can see, to the destination where the client actually intends the traffic to go. These systems have the advantage that it's not necessary to deploy software at the endpoints. A client, for example, or a user doesn't necessarily have to install custom software. But on the other hand, you have to convince internet service providers to deploy this kind of technology on their internet routers, which can sometimes be a very high lift or a very big ask.